Good morning. Uh-oh, I see the sun creeping in. I think it's about to be beaming in my face, which isn't a bad thing. I don't mind. I like the sun. Just more thinking, I've been going for this natural light aesthetic, and then it's just funny. I'm blind over here. Um, Good morning. I don't have any caffeine right now, so I'm feeling super chill. But I'm excited for this morning's chapter. I've just been in the Word and studying it so that I can uh, hopefully have something helpful to share with y'all. There it is. I have this thing called the Wake Up Challenge, and it's literally based around the verse that says, I will awaken the dawn. It's a psalm, and it's like, awake my soul. And it says, I will awaken the dawn. And I always think about how it's like, even in Proverbs 31, right? It says like she wakes up while it's still night. How it's like you are the first creation up, even before the sun. I think about how the birds sing before the sun is up, right? Like they sing right before dawn when it's still dark out, showing that they're awake. Like they're up, they're singing praises. Part of the science behind that is that they are like announcing that they made it through the night. Oh my gosh, this is ridiculous. That they made it through the night, and so they're singing before the sun. They beat the sun. And so anyway, just the idea of being the first of creation to praise him. So Lord, we praise you. We lift you high, Lord, above everything else in our life, in our heart, just our thoughts. Just you are first. We start our day off knowing that you are the one sustaining us through it. You are the one that gives us life, that has us here. So we just focus on you. So may we all together just lock eyes with you. Let everything fade away before there's any time for any other thoughts or concerns or obsessions to fill us up. That we come to you, poured out completely, Lord, so that we can be filled up with you and have true fulfillment, true satisfaction in your presence, so that we're not chasing and seeking out in the world, but that we seek in you, and we seek truth. And you say that we will find it. You will be found by us. So it's not a chasing. It's not endless. And as soon as we turn to you, we find it. As soon as we look for you, we find you, Lord. You are everywhere. You are not hidden. So just thank you for revealing yourself to us, not only in our experiences in life, and us reading the experiences of the lives of those that come before us, but you yourself coming in flesh and blood, giving us a name to call upon, to reveal, to answer our questions, to challenge our thinking, to flip upside down religion and any kind of oppression of man or hierarchy or power or self-effort or self-anything, Lord, to show us that it's all about love. And the only way that we can love those around us is that we love ourselves. And the only way we love ourselves is to love you. And so just that humble relationship, that we do not put ourselves first. But as we put you first, we find out who we are. We find out how loved and accepted we are. We find out where we belong. We feel secure, and we are glad in that dependence. We are dependent on you. We don't have to carry the weight of the world on our shoulders. And so just thank you, Lord, for the opportunity to speak to others and those that come, that we gather together, that in this time, this space, we have the freedom, Lord, and just that we have the gift of connection. So I invite your spirit in this time where two or more of us are gathered and we come into agreement in your word that what you say is true and that it is good and that you are for us. So just continue to guide us. We follow you and we trust you and we love you so much in Jesus' name. Amen. Okie dokie. Oh, thanks, Lord. So that's not my face, but I do have a Holy Spirit beam of light. Okay. So, Matthew chapter 20, we're starting off with a parable and we're getting toward the end, of the book, which is sad, but it means we're getting closer to Jesus's death. And I actually remember teaching my girls about this, how I was like, Jesus, his prophecies are getting faster. Like, it's one thing when he started his ministry and he said, this is going to happen. And then it would happen, 3 years down the road. And then things would start to happen. Like, there's things happening now that he predicted a long time ago, meaning earlier in his ministry. But then he's starting to get to where he'll predict something, right? He's predicted his death twice. So, the first time he predicted his death, it might have been like a year away. Second time he predicted his death, it might have been like a month away. And then now he's predicting his death and it's like coming. But how even when it comes to the Last Supper and he says, Judas go, or tells Judas to go, and he's basically like, betray me. Now we're talking hours. He literally knows that Judas is about to betray him hours later. And then when he's in the garden, he goes up to him, and I'll repeat this obviously when we read it, but he goes up to his disciples and he says, quick, come, the Son of Man is being handed over. And then it's like, as he said it, the guards come up. So it's like it's just getting faster or whatever. So anyway, I'm talking about how we're getting closer in time, but that in that, as he's getting closer to his death, and we'll notice his tone change. I think it actually explicitly says that, but it talks about how he is getting more serious. He's like, I can't beat around the bush anymore. I can't be indirect with my teachings. I only have so many more words left to say, and I've got to get the point across to you. And so his tone starts to change because he's like, you've got to get this. And what I love is that by it being written down, he was able to say it and they were able to write on it, and they probably spent the rest of their life chewing on it, just like how we can spend our life chewing on it, because it's like Jesus had to say it, but by him saying it, it got to be written down and it lives on. But anyway, the parable of the workers in the vineyard. For the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire workers for his vineyard. He agreed to pay them a denarius for the day and sent them into his vineyard. So a denarius is like a day's worth of wages. So he agreed to pay them a denarius for the day and sent them into his vineyard. About 9 a.m, he went out and saw others standing in the marketplace doing nothing. He told them, you also go and work in my vineyard, and I will pay you whatever is right. So they went. He went out again about noon and about 3 p.m. and did the same thing. Okay, so right here, first thing in the morning, 9 a.m, noon, and 3 p.m. He goes out to draft people. In the afternoon and did the same thing. About 5 p.m, he went out and found still others standing around. He asked them, why have you been standing here all day long doing nothing? Because no one has hired us, they answered. So it's not like they didn't want work. It's that no one was offering work. Remember, this is a parable, so we got to read between the lines, and I'll break it down, but it's not, they didn't say, oh, we're not in the field because we don't want to be, because we're lazy, because we're tired, because we're comfortable, because we have enough money. They're like, no one hired us, so we went the day without. And so he said to them, you also go and work in my vineyard. When evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to his foreman, call the workers and pay them their wages, beginning with the last ones hired and going on to the first. The workers who were hired about 5 p.m. came and each received a denarius. So they each received a day's worth of wages. So when those came who were hired first, they expected to receive more. Listen, This is Christians. This is what we were talking about even yesterday with relationships. And this is me, me, me. I should get more because I did more kind of thing, right? Like we think that there's some sort of special treatment. And then the opposite of that, we think negatively toward God if we don't get special treatment. Rather than realizing being included at all, getting the day's worth of work and getting the pay, rather than being grateful for that, in comparison, we, like I said, basically think we deserve more. And if we don't get more, that God isn't good. And all that shows is our heart. It just shows that we're selfish, that we think that, and again, I don't know why we pin ourselves against other people, but rather than staying in our own lane and being like, I got fed today, I got provided for today, because I'm going to keep going and we'll hash this out a little bit more. But I just think that I hope that someone hears that, even if I'm not saying it well, of just how that is the mindset that's twisted. And so many people feel entitled to that mindset. They think it's okay to say, well, I do more, right? It's the self-righteousness thing. Well, I go to church more, I serve more, I do these things, I should get more. And not even just get more in heaven, because it's like, we don't know what's going to happen in heaven, but it's that I should get more in this life. It's not fair that I'm giving and being kind and serving the Lord and I'm not getting more. Because he talks about how even like the wicked, it might even be in Ecclesiastes. Ecclesiastes is great as far as like wealth and how it doesn't give you anything in life, because Solomon was the wealthiest man. But anyway, let me keep going. So they expected to receive more, expected. But each one of them also received a denarius. When they received it, they began to grumble against the landowner. These who were hired last worked only 1 hour, they said, and you have made them equal to us, who have borne the burden of the work and the heat of the day. But he answered, one of them, I'm not being unfair to you, friend. Didn't you agree to work for a denarius? Take your pay and go. I want to give the one who was hired last the same as I gave you. Don't I have the right to do what I want with my own money? Or are you envious because I am generous? It's so good. So the last will be first, and the first will be last. This is the thing. The parable speaks for itself. Like, I just like to chew on it and break it down. And I guess, again, because some people don't have ears to hear, like, I don't know how you can read that and not get it, because it's such a perfect picture without having to point anyone out individually. But the moral of the story, and he sums it up so well, is that if you agree to something, you can't call it unfair if someone else who does less work than you gets the same amount. And now this could literally be at work, but it could just be in anything that you're hoping for in life. It's like, you made the agreement that this was enough for you, that you were grateful for this, that this was good. So only in comparison are you now ungrateful for what you got. And I love him saying too, it's my money. I can do what I want with it. Like, who are you to say that I can't give everybody the same amount? And so again, it just makes me think that the first people are saying, I will work 12 hours for a denarius. And the second group of people is like, I'll work 10 hours for a denarius. And the last group's like, I'll work an hour for a denarius, right? And I think about even literally the workforce today and how there's like titles, and how some people literally will work for 20 bucks an hour, and some people work for 50 bucks an hour, and some people work for 250 bucks an hour or more, right? Like, it's like someone is saying, this is what I'm worth. This is what it costs to work with me. And so anyway, just not being unfair. I just, that entire section, that 13 to 15 to 15. I'm not being unfair. You agreed, and I can do what I want. And it reminds me of the prodigal son story too, of how the son stayed with the father the whole time. I've mentioned it before, I'll mention it again. How the father who stayed with the son the whole time was resentful when his brother came back, because he's like, why are you sharing with my brother? Like, this isn't fair. You're celebrating, throwing him a feast. He gets his robe, he gets his ring. And the father's like, you had this stuff all along. What are you talking about? Like, you get to have feasts all the time. You wear your robe and your ring every day. Like, you've never felt like you didn't belong. He lived and felt like he didn't belong. He ran away, squandered everything, was, like living with the pigs, and feels like he doesn't belong, and came back home. So of course we're going to have a feast and we're going to cover him and love him. But just again, it's that thing of, it's not fair. And not to say that, because I think about justice, the word justice, and how this is us trying to serve justice, where justice, when the Lord speaks about it, he's literally talking about right and wrong and like wickedness. And he's like, I will judge the wicked. And then that's when we get all upset at him. Is like, why does he judge? And why is he such a, why does he have so many boundaries that we can't cross? And like, that is where justice actually needs to be served. And that's where he's serving it. But that in our own life, when we feel like something is unfair, we try to take justice into our own hands. And it's like, this wasn't even wickedness, right? So it just shows again how we don't know. We are not God. I'm sorry, if you aren't watching the video, if you're just listening, I'm like glowing. I mean, I guess it's fine. Hallelujah. But radiating. Okay, so let me see, because I think I had a note too on the first will be last, but let's see. Maybe not. I'll get there because he might say it again. So Jesus predicts his death a third time. Now Jesus was going up to Jerusalem. On the way, he took the 12 aside and said to them, we are going up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be delivered over to the chief priests and the teachers of the law. They will condemn him to death and will hand him over to the Gentiles to be mocked and flogged and crucified. On the third day, he will be raised to life. See, this is interesting because it's all about translation, right? I'm going to look this up because I have the word in my commentary is that he will be betrayed. He announces his betrayal. So let's see, Matthew 20:17. And I guess that's what it means where it says like, Son of Man will be delivered over to the chief priests. But it's saying that it means that he will be betrayed, obviously to be delivered over, but that's a hard one to catch. Like if you didn't catch that yourself and realize that for him to be delivered over means someone hands him over, I think that'd be really easy to miss. So let's see what it actually says. We go to Jerusalem and the Son of Man will be betrayed. That's what it says in the original. Yeah, to deliver, to hand over, to betray will be given. Yeah. So it's like paradidomi is the Greek word, hand over, to deliver over with the sense of a close personal involvement. So that's why he says betrayal. He says to hand over with a close personal involvement. Sorry, I'm trying to see if I can. I don't think I can get away from it. Maybe this will be better for now. But so it's betrayal because he was delivered with a close personal involvement. So I do have some notes on this. So let's see in the commentary. So when the Son of Man says he'll be betrayed, Jesus told the disciples what awaited him in Jerusalem, but no reaction from the disciples is noted. a reaction might be expected when he said he'd be betrayed. So Spurgeon says, Charles Spurgeon, a quote, "This he said in the hearing of the disciple who would act the traitor. Did no compunction visit his base heart," saying like no grief, no guilt. So imagine like he's saying this to his crew. It's not just at the Passover dinner or the Last Supper where he says one of you will betray me, and he's like, it's the one that dips his bread in the wine. That's not the first time he says it. He's saying this now. And so you realize that in this moment, Judas hears it. And again, Spurgeon's question is like, did he not? I mean, he had to have. We're human. He had to have had a moment where his conscience was like feeling guilty, like, oh, should I have done it? I shouldn't have. And sometimes that's when it's like you're in too deep. And I think that's the harder part about getting in too deep is you start to convince yourself there's no way out because it's self-preservation. At that point, Judas could have not followed through, but what would it have cost him? Maybe he'd gotten thrown in jail. Maybe he'd gotten killed. And so now he's thinking, oh my gosh, I promised them Jesus. And if I don't deliver, now they're going to hurt me. They're going to take my life. And so you feel like you have to follow through. And again, you've just gotten yourself too deep into it. And so Spurgeon, I love this too. It says, and still is he betrayed. If the gospel dies in England, write on its tomb, betrayed. If our churches lose their holy influence among men, write on them, betrayed. What care we for infidels? Now, obviously, this is like old language. So, like, what care do we have for infidels? Why do we care about infidelity? Those who have committed infidelity. What care we for those who curse and blaspheme? They cannot hurt the Christ. His wounds are those which he receives in the house of his friend. And when I read that, I thought, that is power. That Christ, there is no betrayal now after that has any harm, because he even shows, because he used betrayal in his story. Someone's betrayal is actually what got him on the cross to fulfill everything. And so this is again when we talk about how he beat the enemy, and like not only did he overcome death, the enemy of death, but how the enemy, right, Satan, adversary, the world, like hate, right, how love beats hate, because hate can't fathom like such a perfect plan where it's like he actually used the hate, just like forgiveness is love using a wrongdoing for its own purpose, right? That's forgiveness. Love uses wrong to show love. And so and that's what the cross even is too, right? It's all forgiveness and reconciliation, but how Jesus used betrayal to actually fulfill the purpose. It's what got him on the cross to save us all, including those that betray him. So it's like, even when he said they know not what they do, right? But that just shows the power of God. And it takes me back to the wheat and the weeds thing, where it's like, why are they both growing at the same time? Why is there good and evil? But it's like, he's purposing evil. When we think, how can he purpose evil for good? He used evil in his own story for a good purpose. Like God from the beginning knew that evil was actually what he was going to use. The evil in the hearts of man that put him up on the cross, he was going to use that evil to serve the purpose of saving humanity. So seemingly the disciples did not really listen when Jesus said these things. Their expectation was so focused on Jesus establishing an immediate political kingdom. And these words from Jesus were so contrary to that anticipation. These words just went over their heads. They were so focused on what they thought was going to happen, what they were going to get out of it with an immediate kingdom. And I think I've said this before, but it was a really cool thing I heard where it was like, the Israelites thought Jesus was going to give them another exodus. So how the Israelites had an exodus out of Egypt, and then that's when they, built their own nation. That they thought he was going to give them an exodus out of Rome, not an exodus out of this world. Like Jesus is Exodus, the whole point of Exodus, it's like that's what Jesus was showing, but his Exodus is not just another physical Exodus of like taking you out of one country and moving you into another like plot of land. That he showed us the true Exodus is that like we will leave this world behind, this earth, and there's a new creation and new life. And then from Poole it says, but Luke saith, so the book of Luke, they understood none of these things. That is, surely they believed none of them. The saying was hid from them. And then Spurgeon says, when our Lord told the 12 that he would die, they imagined that it was a parable, concealing some deep mystery. They looked at one another and they tried to fathom where there was no depth, but where the truth lay on the surface. So that's kind of cool too, is to think sometimes truth is right there. It's right in front of us. The truth is on the surface. I have another little Holy Spirit beam. Where is it? Hi. But the truth is right on the surface. So it's not about digging deep. It's not having to, and sometimes I think about that with intellect. And this is where when it's like God in his wisdom didn't use the wisdom of man, like that's why like the cross can seem foolishness, all that kind of stuff, right? It's like it's not man's wisdom. Sometimes the wisdom is going too deep, and I don't even want to use the word wisdom because I like to use wisdom as a word for God to distinguish between the two. Wisdom is the knowledge God gives, and intellect is the knowledge that we have. Without an intellect, you're trying to find layers and dig deep. And I think about with atheism and all the stuff with the world, and it's like the truth is right on the surface, right? The truth is right in front of us, and we're digging, being like, oh, where's the truth? Where's the deep? And we're so in it, you can't see, right? You can't see the forest through the trees. And so that's what's happening here is they're like trying to find the parable behind what he's saying about him dying. And he's like, no, I'm just telling you, I'm just telling you I'm going to die. But so it says it is often more agonizing to contemplate the painful future than it is to actually live it. It's more agonizing. This is anxiety kind of thing. It's more agonizing to contemplate the painful future than it is to actually live it. Jesus openly acknowledged the suffering and agony that awaited him. Jesus thought about how he would fulfill the will of his Father in the future. There was value for him to look at his coming trial and to think and say, I will complete what my Father has given me to do. I will obey to the end. This is where we say he was obedient to death. He restrained himself. He was like, I'm going to do it. I've committed. I've decided I'm going to do it. And it makes me think about when it says, for the joy set before him, he endured the cross. It's the same thing. It's like, just like he knows there's joy on the other side, so he endures the cross. This is the same thing. Before the cross, he knows the cross is coming. And it says there was value for him to look at his coming trial. And so for those of us that are doing everything to avoid every single trial that could possibly come, instead, see value in your coming trial, right? It's like not only trying to be prepared for your coming trial, but know that like that's just the perspective you have of the future. Any trials that are going to come are going to have value. So it's like just that way is how you can face your future suffering and your future agony, because otherwise thinking of future suffering and agony is going to steal from today. And we hear quotes about that all the time. So Jesus is a great example here of that. Okay, and then the word for betrayed, it says, and then they will kill him, right? They will condemn him to death. He'll be delivered over, and they will condemn him to death. And so it says, Jesus confidently predicted that the religious leaders would do this. Yet this was not something he could plan. And so I like this too, because when we think about predestination and this whole idea of how like the Lord has designed us all to be conformed in the image of Christ, basically meaning we're all branches that broke off from the tree, but he knew he was going to create a way where we would be grafted back in, right? And I've said this before, and I'll say it again. And if you don't know what it is, look up grafting. But basically, grafting is a actual thing that exists in nature where you can put a branch back onto a tree and it grows back. It becomes a part of the tree again. So he literally, we're all broken off trees, right? All have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. Like we're all the broken off branch, and that he was going to make a way to bring us back. But so that part of predestination. But when it's saying like it's not something he could plan, like God uses, like responds, I guess, to our choices and can still fulfill his will. Because again, this is the thing. I've said this before too, but maybe this will make sense. There's success and failure, and there's the Lord's way is always going to be success, right? A tree, a seed that you put in soil that grows roots, that has water and sunlight, and like grows up into a trunk with branches will bear fruit, right? A seed that you put in a Ziploc bag, or that you put like whatever, I don't even know, in your pocket, like it's not going to happen. It's not going to turn into anything. So this is why he can make sure his plan works, because everything that's his way succeeds, and everything that's our way or in opposition any other way is going to fail. So all of this is why he says it's fruitless, it's unproductive, it's aimless, because you're spending time and energy on things that are never going to stand, never going to come to be. So all of this, and I think about the houses that are built on rock and sand. This is you building your house on sand. You can spend your whole life building a house that's just going to crumble because you built it on sand, or you build the house and it lasts because it's on rock. But this is how it's like able to be determined that his will happen, because his will is all the things that will succeed. And then because they're true. And then everything that's not his will fail because it's in opposition to him. It's false. It's a lie, whatever. It's built on sand. It won't last. And so he knows like his bricks get laid. And then it's just who's available, who's the hands and feet to lay the bricks. But so he didn't make the religious leaders do this, but it's like knowing they were going to do it. He didn't choose it for them, right? We have the free will, we choose. But him knowing what we're going to choose, he can use it in his story, right? He can use the crumbling of this, just like, think about how just truth becomes more truthful in the face of a lie. Like, truth is always true. But when lies are happening around it, it just makes the truth more evident. So it's that kind of thing. It's like people doing all of this stuff, like, just makes his plan happen. But like I said, just that he didn't choose it for them. They, in their own will, chose failure, falsehood, lies, vileness, selfishness, right? They chose all of that. But he always knew he was going to use that. And just like I had said, a couple minutes ago about how he used evil for the sake of good, right? He uses the wrongdoing for the sake of forgiveness, for the sake of love. So this is the same thing. It's like he's not stopping them from doing it. They're doing it. And then it's being purposed. Let's see. So let's keep going. But then, and let's not miss, hand them over to the Gentiles to be mocked and flogged and crucified. And again, they can't process this. They're like, nope, no, that's not going to happen. This must be a parable. On the third day, he will be raised to life. Let's go. And Jesus is, again, saying this. He's predicting it. And this is the third time now he's said it. But he's not only predicting his death, he's predicting his resurrection. And so it's not even just powerful that he did resurrect. It'd be one thing if he died and then 3 days later he resurrected and he was like, that, everyone was like, that's never happened before. He told us before he died that this was going to happen. He said adamantly with authority multiple times, I am going to raise from the dead. And it wasn't just vague. It wasn't just, the temple will crumble and I will rebuild it on the third day, right? Some of those things where we're like, was he talking about himself? And it's like, okay, he says, I will be killed and on the third day raised to life. Okay, a mother's request. Then the mother of Zebedee's sons came to Jesus with her sons and kneeling down asked a favor of him. What is it you want? He asked. She said, and I just think about, I guess we'll get there. She said, grant that one of these 2 sons of mine may sit at your right hand and the other at your left in your kingdom. You don't know what you are asking. Jesus said to them, can you drink the cup I am going to drink? We can, they answered. I don't even know what they just said. Jesus said to them, you will indeed drink from my cup, but to sit at my right or left is not for me to grant. These places belong to those for whom they have been prepared by my Father. Even that, us trying to step into places where the Lord's like, that place isn't prepared for you. Like, I prepared that place for someone and that place isn't prepared for you. Like, you do have a place, you do have a calling, but this is where it's like, accept your call, accept your place. You're in the story. Like, just again, this comparison thing. Why are we trying to take other people's places? Why are we trying to be in better places? It's like, we have a place prepared for us. But I like this. It belongs to those whom has been prepared for by my Father. When the 10 heard about this, they were indignant with the two brothers. Jesus called them together and said, "You know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be your slave. Just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many." And people can't handle this either when they're like, why do we have to be, you know, obedient to Christ and stuff? And it's like, he's literally saying, like, I, the creator of the universe, have served everything I've created. That is what makes me powerful. That is what makes me great, is that I am in this constant state of generosity and outpouring into the creation around me. Again, just parent child. It's like, to become a parent, you have to give yourself. That's part of even just the birth, right? Um, but he's like, I didn't come, like, they keep thinking he's going to find some, and again, like the way that they think of government and power, and that he was going to come and overthrow everyone and like literally sit on some kind of throne and flip the oppression, and he was going to be mighty and be all like, everyone has to listen to what I say, and like a dictator. And he's like, no, do you not get it yet? Like, this is my world, like my kingdom, because I serve every single person I encounter. I make time for them. I'm compassionate with them. I see them and I love them and I hear them. And it's like that is what makes him the ruler. And it's just opposite of everything we think. And so it's one thing if you're in the world. If you're in the world and you haven't chosen Christ yet, then you think that way. But anyone who's a Christian, you've got to stop thinking that way. Like, you cannot follow Christ and not understand what it is that he says and what he's teaching. And it is that we do not see the world like that. We do not think about how we can climb and have power and have glory, and how we rule over others, and how we're just too cool and untouchable and don't have time. Nope. Jesus, our God, showed that you can make time and that you are touchable, and that is what life is. Like, he literally is giving his life. His entire life has nothing to do with him trying to go find comfort. Again, he's homeless. He doesn't have a place to lay his head. He's constantly just meeting new people, loving on them, meeting new people, loving on them, town to town to town to town until he dies. That's what life is. And that's what he's showing. That's what life is made up of. That's what gives you a full life, not you acquiring a bunch of possessions, not you feeling like you've accomplished things, but you just literally spending your time and your energy loving God and loving others. But so, right, he's like, you don't know what you're asking. And so there was a commentary that said, if we remember yesterday, Matthew chapter 19, their thrones were already established. He literally just told the disciples, all 12 of you are going to have thrones in Israel, or not, oh my gosh, in heaven. Or he says, those that follow me. And this is where it's like, does you just have one? But also, I think that that's getting in the weeds. Like, do we care? Like, why do we need to spend time on that? But I would say probably not, because he didn't ultimately follow Jesus. Like, his heart wasn't for the Lord. It was fake or whatever. But their thrones were already established. So they had been told they're going to have a throne in heaven. And rather than that being enough, it's like the mother, but she's saying, but can my sons have like the highest throne, like the highest authority? Because only one person could sit on your right and on your left. And I think about how it always says how Jesus is seated at the right hand of the Father. So it's like, sounds like the Father's on the left of Jesus. But anyway, that they're trying to find the precedence, like they're trying to find the order and like where they fit and if they can be greater than the other two. But this is what's funny. So it says too, how they, he's like, you think you can drink my cup? And they're like, yeah, we could drink your cup. He's like, okay, you'll drink it. That's what he gives them. He doesn't give them the thrones, but he says, you will drink the same cup as me. And so they said, we are able to, seems to come a little too quick. Jesus recognized they didn't really understand, but they would. And so for Meyer, it says, these men slept in Gethsemane, forsook the master when he was arrested, and one of them at least failed him at the cross. We can only follow Christ in his cup and baptism after we have been endued with the spirit of Pentecost. But it's like literally these guys couldn't even fulfill the things that he was asking. He couldn't stay awake in the garden. They abandoned him at the cross. But I like this too, is like when he says like, can you drink my cup? It's like, that's what we get. We get to drink the same cup of Jesus as, right, suffering, death, and then also share with him though in baptism, like share with him the death of our old self, share with him in resurrection power, right? Because the Holy Spirit. And so it says when, they're saying, can I sit on the right and the left? And he says, this power isn't mine. So Spurgeon, it's saying, in this laying aside of authority, he gives a silent rebuke to our self-seeking, because that's what they're doing. It's like, yet again, they're thinking about themselves and where they can be seated and what they're going to get out of it. Jesus just told them he's going to die and how he's going to die, be flogged and crucified. And they're asking about their position in heaven. It's so sad. Oh, and it's what we do, right? We can't judge because it's what we all do. But, and so I guess he says again, right? He ended the first parable with whoever's last will be first and whoever's first will be last. And then he ends this one. Actually, no, he doesn't end this one. They were greatly displeased. Oh, he says, yeah, whoever wants to be great among you. So 27, whoever wants to be first must be your slave, right? Whoever wants to be great among you must be a servant. Whoever wants to be first must be your slave. So he's saying the same thing. If this like first is last, last is first. It says in the pagan world, humility was regarded not as a virtue, but as a vice. Imagine a slave being given leadership. I think that's so interesting because think about the world. I mean, the world we live in is still pagan. That's what it would be, right? It's opposition to God, but how we don't see humility as a virtue. It's actually seen as a vice. It's seen as something like a downfall, a stronghold, something you want to break out of. Like, again, because like think about slavery, you would think, oh, what a bad place to be. I've got to break out of this. And that's where we get that achiever mindset. I've got to have more. I don't want to be in poverty. I don't want to be in scarcity. I don't want to be lowly. So it's like, I need to get myself out. And then that becomes the independence kind of thing, right? I need to get out of this discomfort of me not having everything I want, and I deserve everything I want. I'm going to go get everything I want. But also continuing to use this language of like, if you want to be first, you've got to be the slave, right? You've got to serve. Like that's the heart. And we hear this language and think about, and I've said it before, and I haven't thoroughly articulated it in here because it's like a separate topic, but this idea of like slavery and belonging, and how even when he says these places belong to those whom they've been prepared for, right? It's like the word belong is the same as slave, but it's like that we serve. If you're a bondservant, you're a servant, you are a slave. And how the word ransom, right? When it says that he gave his life as a ransom, ransom is used for slavery. It says ransom was commonly used as the purchase price for freeing slaves. So it's like you already are a slave, right? And get the language, get the picture. You're already a slave to your own selfishness, to your own desires, to your own whims, to your own pride, to your own independence, to your own justice seeking and unfairness, right? You're a slave to all of that. So he dies and sets us free. That's our sin. That's our waywardness. It's like we have been set free from that. So he's ransomed us from being a slave to sin. And we'll hear this language later. And he says, so now you're a slave to righteousness. And it's this idea of you're either a slave to disobedience or a slave to obedience. Why? Because you're obeying one of them. You belong to one of them. You either belong to disobedience or belong to obedience because they're opposite. They're polar. You're one or the other. Like you either belong to justice or you belong to injustice. It says, had all the sinners that ever lived, this is Spurgeon, had all the sinners that ever lived in the world been consigned to hell, they could not have discharged the claims of justice. Meaning if every single one of us did get sent to hell, We cannot say that that is unjust. Why? Because we have done something wrong, right? We've done wrong. And so we've gone wayward, right? Justice being served. And so this is where the irony is we want justice except for ourselves. We want mercy for ourselves. But justice being served rightfully for all of us would be that we're done so. And I've said this before too, but the Lord clearly not just wiping us all out shows his grace, but also shows his plan. He knew he was going to redeem us. So that's why he's let us stay and let us continue living through the generations. If we were all just awash, there would have been no need to continue it. He's like, I'm going to come and ransom them. I'm going to free them from their bondage to their, isolation and separation from me and from their anxiety and from their depression and from all their mental, prison, their inner battle. But I've also heard that you are either a slave to discipline or you're a slave to chaos, right? It's that kind of thing. Like we think freedom is chaos, freedom is actually discipline. But so just understand that word, that terminology. You're bound to something because you are choosing something. So it's like whatever you're choosing, think of that as what you're bound to. But anyway, that it would be just for us to all, like that's the mindset you have to have and understand we are all wrong. And so when you realize justice being served is us getting properly what we're due. And so then from that place, realizing, oh my gosh, you freed us from that. You freed us from the trap we created, the pit we got ourselves into. You pulled us out of darkness into light. You pulled us out of the mud and set us on a rock. And so anyway, that's the ransom, is that he freed us from slavery. But so he's saying you've been freed from the slavery, like the yoke of slavery, right? My yoke is easy, my burden is light. Like you don't have the heavy yoke of the world, that kind of oppressive slavery. But in your freedom, you serve, right? Now you lay yourself down. I think that's what people hate, is they don't like that in one sense they were being pushed down. And so now that they're not being pushed down, they want to be able to skyrocket up. And the Lord's like, oh, no. Now that you're not being pushed down, you lay yourself down. That's the right heart. And that's why we just understand this is so beyond us. And it's like literally calling us to be a better person and the best person we could ever possibly be. And that's why it's a tough pill to swallow. Because it's like, wait, you're telling me you didn't free me so I can do whatever I want. You're telling me you freed me so I can be a better person. It's like, yeah, this is the veggies. Okay, 2 blind men received sight. As Jesus and his disciples were leaving Jericho, a large crowd followed him. 2 blind men were sitting by the roadside, and when they heard that Jesus was going by, they shouted, Lord, Son of David, have mercy on us. The crowd rebuked them and told them to be quiet, but they shouted all the louder, Lord, Son of David, have mercy on us. Jesus stopped and called them. What do you want me to do for you? He asked. Lord, they answered, we want our sight. Jesus had compassion on them and touched their eyes. Immediately they received their sight and followed him. So there was another story of 2 blind men that I was thinking was this one. This is the one that I remember hearing a sermon about. And basically it's because it's like they are blind, so they hear him and they hear him going by and they shout and they don't get acknowledged. So they shout louder, right? So talk about the humility. They're like, we will be heard. It's similar because the other guys like followed him into his house. But this is our chance. Like, we are not going to miss our chance. Jesus is walking by right now. And we don't know when we're ever going to have him walk by again, right? It's that kind of desperation of like, now's my shot. Also, how Jesus asks them, what do you want me to do for you? And it's the same thing with the mother. The mother comes. It's like, I have a request. And I just think of the difference between the fact that there's people out here praying for healing, and then there's people out here praying for status. And so this is why when it's like, why is the Lord not answering my prayers? He's not giving me what I want. And it's the whole, you ask, you do not receive, because you ask with wrong motives to spend them on your own pleasures. And I said, are you the only one benefiting from your prayer? This request for this mother is like, my sons, who cares about this earth? Who cares about all the sick? But like after they die, like, can they have power with you? And it's like, Jesus is God. Like, what are you talking about? Like, anyway, sorry, that's obviously frustrating. But that's what their prayer is. And then how Jesus, and look at Jesus's response. So I'm just saying, when you're wondering why there might be some things out here where you're praying for status and the Lord isn't answering it, what do we know about the Lord and his nature? How does he respond to those kinds of requests versus the request that's like, heal me, right? Because he says the same thing. What do you want? And they say, we want our sight. And that also is a request of faith. They're not saying we want, an easy life. It's something big, something hard, something only God can do. They want healing. And we know that Jesus' ministry is about healing. But I love that. And the question that I heard when I was listening to the sermon was like, ask yourself that. If Jesus were to come up to you right now and say, what do you want? What would you say? I was like, that's actually a pretty crazy question, because you got to be specific. Like, you've got your chance. You've got your chance. Jesus comes up and he says, what do you want? You don't get to do a laundry list. What is it that you really want? And then also, this causes you to check your heart. What is it that you're actually asking for? Like I said, people have so many prayers left and right all over the place of their agenda and their dreams and the future they want. And it's like, if you have to pick one, what is the root of it? What are you really praying for? And so I just think that's a great question. I'll probably put that over into the questions. What is it that you want? But imagine Jesus asking you that, what do you want? And it makes me think about the guy that was paralyzed, and Jesus says, do you want to be healed? And he's like, yes. But it's the same kind of thing. You have to want to receive it. You have to want healing for Jesus, to heal you, to be healed. It's like, you have to communicate what you want. And I think there was a commentary on that too that said, like, Jesus, I like this too. Clark said when he's talking about the men shouting, he says, when the world and the devil begin to rebuke. So, right, they're shouting and everyone's rebuking them. Get out of here, get out of here. In this case, it is proof that the salvation of God is near. Therefore, let such cry out a great deal the more. So when you're in that and the world's rebuking, trying to shut you up, you shout louder. You call out to Jesus more. Don't you dare shut up. Don't you dare get quiet. You shout out to Jesus more. And no, I guess that I was going to say, like, it made me have another thought. Maybe it'll come back. And that wasn't even the original thing I was looking at. I was looking up this. What do you want me to do for you? Jesus asked the question with full knowledge that these men were blind. He knew what they needed and what they wanted, but God still wants us to tell him our needs as a constant expression of our trust and reliance on him. So understand, this is prayer, right? It's like, I'm telling you, I'm including you in my conversation. I'm letting you know what I want, not just saying, well, read my mind and read my heart and just do it for me, right? It's like, there's a relationship here. It also says from Clark, reader, whoever you are, act in behalf of your soul, or the same soul as the blind men did, on behalf of their sight. And salvation is sure. Apply to the Son of David. Sorry. Lose not a moment. He is passing by. And you are passing into eternity. And probably will never have a more favorable time than the present. Favorable opportunity than the present. The Lord increased his earnestness and faith. Or the Lord increased I guess I don't know. It's saying, this is like old English, so it says thy. Maybe that means my. The Lord increased my earnestness and faith. But it makes me think in Hebrews when it's like, do today, as long as it's called today, do not let your heart be hardened. And I've said this, it's always now. It's always today. So there is never a more opportune time to call out to the Lord than now. Why would you wait for tomorrow? Why would you wait? First of all, you're not promised tomorrow. And he says that in James. He's like, you make all these plans for what you're going to do a year from now. You don't even know what's going to happen tomorrow. There is not a more opportune time today. Today, now. Why would you wait? So anyway, call out to the Lord. He's in front of you. He's passing by. This is your moment. And then when he asks, what do you want? Do you know what you want? And can you communicate it to him? And are you willing? Like, are you willing to receive it? Do you really want it? So anyway, good stuff. There's always good stuff. It's so jam-packed. So chew on it, whatever section stood out to you too. If there's anything you want to dive in deeper. Because again, the whole point of this is me just showing you how I do it, how I think, how I ask, and maybe it takes you down some rabbit holes, and the Lord has revelation for you, right? Like, I don't know every single revelation. I just know what comes to me and how I, work through it. But I know that the Lord has things in here for you too. If you just take the time to sit with it and think about it. What's happening? What's being revealed? What, is standing out about human nature, and lessons can you learn? And what are you kind of uncomfortable with, right? Like, what needs to settle in more? Because I specifically just thought about the slave thing. Like, I love that because I've had so much revelation about learning to have a right heart and to not be offended by those words, but to really understand what they actually mean. And so, anyway, okay. I love you. I'll see you guys in the questions.